about to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out, die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's be free with me. Be free. Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out, die with my own doubts. Be free.
Good evening, everybody. It's John here from Tutor Stew, welcoming you back. We've had a couple of weeks off for half term. Welcoming you back to this, our latest live stream for GCSE History. And we're continuing to concentrate on the Germany in between the two world wars. And I'm an economist by trade. So tonight's the big topic for me, the one that I use quite regularly when I'm teaching economics as the example of hyperinflation, where hyperinflation really impacts upon an economy and has big social and political impacts as well. So we're going to talk about hyperinflation in Germany. Welcome to those of you who are watching us live. Looking at my clock down there, I can see we've got a few of you here. Hopefully you're going to take part in our activity tonight. And if not, if you're watching this on replay, a big welcome to you as well. I'm joined by our two regular presenters, backed by very, very popular demand, I should say, gents. We've got Duncan on the left-hand side of the screen.
Hello.
And Rocky in the middle. Good evening, both.
Hello.
Hi.
Did you both manage to get a little bit of time off during half term?
Yeah, bit.
Good stuff.
Yes, thank you.
Good stuff. Okay, if you've not watched one of our live streams before, where have you been? That's my first question. Second point, we would love you to participate as we actually ask the questions that we've got for you. We've got about 30 to 35 minutes worth of activities and exam advice. And where you can, we'd love you to get involved by typing your answers into our chat window. We'll give you a few directions as the session goes on. Don't worry, this video is being recorded. So if we do anything and go past it and we've been really quick or something like that, you can always re-watch it. So don't worry about that. And the PowerPoint slides that we're about to show you will be available for download afterwards as well. Right, I think I've said everything I need to, gentlemen. Are we ready? Shall we get started?
Yeah, great. Let's
I
get
think
going.
you're on first, Rocky, with their conveyor belt quiz.
That's it. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hope you're well. So, the conveyor belt quiz basically, there'll be 6 questions, and they'll run through as a conveyor belt, hence the title of the task. And you'll have 10 seconds to process each question and work out the answer. If you know the answer, then just put it in the chat function, and then we can start to assess these, and we'll give the answers after the minute is up. Okay. Basically, what we cover now is going to look at some of the causes leading up to hyperinflation. Great. So, best of luck. There you go. They do, those 10 seconds do go quickly. So essentially all 6 of those were looking at causes and the lead up and the build up to hyperinflation. I see a couple of answers here already. One of them is spot on, so very well done. So if we go through quickly, please, the answers. So the first one, this ties into your prior knowledge about Treaty of Versailles. So reparations from the treaty were calculated at £6.6 billion. So I see a few of you got those correct. That's great. Now the Treaty of Versailles is in 1919, but the reparations themselves are not calculated, and there are demands not made on the Germans to pay them until 1922. So that's why the hyperinflation eventually occurs in 1923. That's why it doesn't happen immediately after the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, fantastic. Next one, please. The Ruhr was a location occupied by the French, and it comprised of 80% of German coal, iron, and steel reserves. So that's very, very problematic, because when the French do eventually occupy the Ruhr, obviously they're making a bad economic situation in Germany worse. So they're occupying this territory because they're taking these reserves in lieu of payment, because the Germans can't pay reparations. But obviously, Germany's economy is dependent on that coal, iron, and steel in the Ruhr. Okay, fantastic. Number 3. I've been drumming this one in to some of my students. We've been talking about this a lot. So the demilitarized territory from the Treaty of Versailles was the Rhineland. It meant that the Germans couldn't necessarily protect their own border, and that allowed the French easy access via the Rhineland into the Ruhr. Okay, French army numbered 750,000, and the German army, again courtesy of the Treaty of Versailles, by this point numbers 100,000. Now, I don't want you to think 750,000 French soldiers march into the Ruhr. They don't. Essentially, though, because of the size of the French army and the relative size of the German army, essentially the Germans can't do anything. So the French are easily able to occupy the Ruhr, and the Germans essentially just have to let it happen. And then the last one, going on strike. That's it, known as passive resistance. So the German government encouraged those German workers not to help those awful French that have occupied the Ruhr, and this process is known as passive resistance. Now, in order to go on strike, or to practice passive resistance. And this ties into the next question. The German government promised to do something. And they promised to pay the workers, but they don't have the money to do this because they can't even pay back reparations, and so they print money. And that starts to lead into this, spiral of inflation and then hyperinflation. Okay, that's it.
Fantastic. Okay, so some really useful background there to what this is all about. We've got an activity now called Mend the Gap. So there's going to be a phrase, a little passage about hyperinflation, but there are some gaps in it. There are some missing words. Actually, I think we've been kind and given you the first letters in some cases. And your job, those of you watching live can type into the chat window. Those of you watching on catch up can have a little longer to think about it, but it's to try and fill those gaps to work out what words are missing. So we've got 2000 p something mils were dedicated to printing more banknotes. However, because there were no signs of the economy improving, and because reparations needed to be paid, and the something beginning with an R was still occupied, might know that one from the last activity, hopefully, money was continually printed to meet the ever-rising inflation. This continued to such an extent that the German economy reached an uncontrollable state of something beginning with H. There's a clue in the title of the activity, of the session, possibly, where money became worthless and the value of goods changed by the hour. In 1919, something, and the little red lines are showing you how many words there are there, and the sort of broad length of the words, was 1 mark. By 1923, it was something marks. Okay, anyone want to fill in these gaps? Shall we start with the first one? 2000 p mils. What were they? Dedicated to printing more banknotes. Should we have a look? Printing mills. Okay, so there were 2000 printing mills. There were lots and lots of banknotes being printed. Where was the place that was occupied? Which bit of Germany was being occupied, leading to them having to continually print more money to meet the ever-rising inflation? We've got what that one is, beginning with R. The Ruhr. Well done, Elizabeth. There's mentioned paper mills. It could have been paper mills. Yeah, that was. It did need to make a lot of paper as well as print a lot of notes. Absolutely. This continued to such an extent that the German economy reached an uncontrollable state of what? Beginning with H. I think we know this one, don't we? Should we have a look? Yeah, hyperinflation. Clues in the session title. And then I think the last little bit is probably key to try to understand the nature of hyperinflation. In 1919, what was 1 mark? A something was 1 mark, and by 1923 it was something else marks. And by the very nature of hyperinflation, we know the second figure is going to be higher than 1 mark. So what do we think it might be? What sort of product is often given as a sort of measure of hyperinflation? People often say a particular item that that got a lot more expensive over that period of time. Okay, shall we have a look? It is a loaf of bread. So in 1919, a loaf of bread was 1 mark. How much do you think a loaf of bread cost by 1923? Doesn't matter if you don't know it. Let's have a shot in the dark. Let's see who can get the closest. Have a guess. How much do you think a loaf of bread might have cost by 1923? If you do know it, brilliant. But if you're not sure, have a guess. We know it's going to be more because of inflation. We talk about hyperinflation. How much more? Oh, Elizabeth, I don't know how much that is because there's so many noughts. That's a lot of noughts, isn't it? It's a lot. 10,000 marks. We've had a suggestion. I think Elizabeth's even more. Stefano's 250 million marks. Shall we have a look? 200 billion marks. that's a very expensive loaf of bread. But obviously, in some ways, it isn't that the marks are becoming essentially worthless. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else you want to add about that, Ross?
No, only in the sense that it's going to tie into something that we're going to show you later regarding sort of the worthlessness and arbitrary nature of just assigning values to banknotes. I mean, obviously, this is not a politics session, but you might be want to keep an eye on what's happening in Venezuela at the moment, or looking more recently at Zimbabwe, to give you an idea of a sort of hyperinflation in real time. Okay, next one. Great. So first activity, we looked at the causes. Most recent one with Duncan looked at sort of the issues surrounding hyperinflation. Now this one is looking at some of the impacts. So on balance, we're looking at two ways in which Germans lost out from hyperinflation, and then strangely, because obviously nobody wants hyperinflation in the economy, there are some people that don't necessarily lose out, and there are some benefits, believe it or not, to hyperinflation, but it's definitely not a suggested way of running an economy. So anybody have any suggestions as to two ways in which Germans lost out from hyperinflation? What do you think it could be? If the government is having to print lots and lots of money to pay workers, if, based on Duncan's example, we've looked at how a loaf of bread skyrockets within a short amount of time. Apologies if I pronounce your name wrong. Is it Zachariah? Zach? Hope you don't mind me calling you Zach. They couldn't import because their currency essentially became worthless. Excellent. Now, that's not what I have on there, but that is definitely a very, very good answer. Money loses value, Stephanos. Brilliant, very good. Think about the impacts then of that. Aqua, did wealthy people gain? Well, they do to an extent, yes, very good. In terms of some gaining from hyperinflation, we're going to investigate that. That's one of the answers that I've got, actually. You might want to think about how and why wealthy people gained. So when you're writing up your answers, obviously that little bit of extra explanation and development will really showcase to the examiner you understand how these ideas link together. Good answers there, well done. So, should we have a little look? Fantastic. Apologies, Zach. I did put that as an answer. Short-term memory isn't what it used to be. Yeah, so because German money became worthless, it was difficult to pay for imported goods, and then this led to food shortages. I'm just seeing another answer from Stephanos here. You would have had to have massive wages to even have a decent life. Yeah, good. And essentially, these wages become worthless because they're constantly printed. Some people are experiencing, new wages twice daily. Another reason why Germans lost out from hyperinflation, people's savings became worthless. Imagine you work all your life in order to ensure that you're saving money, you're putting it in the bank just like you're told to, and then because of hyperinflation, those savings are completely wiped out. It's going to make you extremely resentful and extremely bitter and extremely frustrated with the Weimar government, who are just letting this happen and not having a handle on the situation. Very good answers. So, two ways in which certain Germans gained.
I mean, I'm just speculating here, but if savings were, became worthless, they kind of flip that on its head. If you owed money, would that mean that your debts became less? I'm just thinking. I'm sort of thinking how it might be handy.
I mean, often it's a good way of sort of working these answers out, isn't it? Because if you're looking at two sides of an argument, you would just try and flip it. We've got an answer from Elizabeth here. Public would have lost money to the point where economy became corrupt and things became unaffordable. That's interesting. Yeah, things become unaffordable. You've also got an issue where there'll be a lot of sort of bartering and black market trading as well. So that would link to obviously Germans losing out. So how would Germans gain?
I suppose from Elizabeth's point, some might gain from marketing things on the black market and things like that, mightn't they? If you've
Yeah,
that there's potential gains in there, isn't there?
that's true. Yeah,
If
I
you've got
suppose you'd
stuff.
definitely be, absolutely. Yeah, you'd be able to exploit those that are most vulnerable.
Mm.
Definitely. Great. Shall we have a look then? Okay, so just like Duncan said, with that brilliant hint, so those who are in debt or who had taken loans out from the banks could now pay them back easily. So if you was in arrears, obviously money essentially has no value. So it means that your debts are essentially wiped out. And many rich businessmen are able to purchase smaller businesses that went bankrupt. So you do have more businesses and sort of particular areas of the economy becoming more concentrated in fewer hands. So yeah, there are some gains and there are some losses. Very good. So bearing that in mind, you could have potentially a 12-mark question on those, looking at, I don't know, explain the impacts or explain the negative impacts of hyperinflation, or perhaps, I don't know, explain the effects and the more broader effects of hyperinflation. Great. Okay, so now we're going to look at 2 4-mark questions. Now, it may seem like a long time ago, but a couple of weeks ago when we looked at the Cap Putsch, there was information regarding how to answer a 4-mark question. We're going to look at a couple here. So, 2 things you can infer from the source about the problems the Weimar Republic faced. So, Weimar experienced easy for me to say, catastrophes of civil war, hyperinflation, stabilization, depression, and political paralysis. So, what 2 things could you infer from the source about the problems Weimar Republic faced? So, again, going back to some of the ideas that I gave you a couple of weeks ago, you might want to think about sort of emotive language or sort of almost translating that language also. What does it mean and what supporting detail could you use? So, what kind of language gives us an idea that allows us to infer problems that Weimar faced?
Well, catastrophe. And you're just making me say it, aren't you? So that language definitely seems to imply
Absolutely. I think
problems, doesn't it?
Aqua got it. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I've just sorry, I've just quickly, not to digress, although I am digressing. I've just seen a comment here, Faraz, about sort of the causes and what happened before. So we went through that with the first task, Faraz. So once this finishes, you'll be able to download all the resources that looks at sort of reparations payments, passive resistance, and why hyperinflation eventually occurred. Right. So Aqua, fantastic. Catastrophes. Now, if Eric Weitz is using this term catastrophes, what could you infer about the problems or the nature of the problems? That's the tricky aspect. That's how we get that second that mark. So the catastrophes is the supporting detail. You've got your mark. What's the inference? So I'll give everyone a little bit longer, and then we can go through the answers.
It's quite tricky, isn't it? On the
It
face of it, you
is.
think, well, it's a very short extract that we're using. There's not a lot to pick up on, but that link that between finding a sort of relevant word and then linking it to how it infers it is quite tricky.
Yeah,
Tricky skill.
absolutely. If you don't have the sort of emotive language, and we've got catastrophes. I've just seen an answer here from Stefanos here. He's used obviously hyperinflation. He's talked about civil war as well. Now, by using those two as supporting details, and Elizabeth just added to this with political paralysis, great. Rather than simply restate those, what do those represent? What do they show? What do they reveal about the problems Weimar Republic faced? You could lump them all together if you like to give us an inference. Okay, very nice. We've got one answer here from Aqua about the inference that via catastrophes, Weimar had lots of negative things to deal with and it was disastrous. That's very good. And then Stefanos has said, based on hyperinflation, we can infer that the Weimar has to deal with economic problems. Fantastic. That's all you need. Supporting detail is a mark. Explaining what that supporting detail means is another mark. And this is, a 4-mark question. So they're not looking for war and peace. Just be very clear. Fantastic. So
I think we've got
Elizabeth.
an example of... Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, go on, Duncan, please.
I was just going to say we've got an example answer shortly, haven't we? But Honor coming forward.
Yes.
But yes, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. Don't worry.
No, it's fine. Well, we can have a look at that answer actually, because I just got one comment from a student. You can infer that the problems were hard to deal with and caused panic in the public. That is a brilliant inference, and then you could use some language, specific language from that to support that. So if we have a quick look, do we have the answer?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, here we go.
Fantastic. Great. So, what I can infer, Weimar experienced a range of problems that were difficult to overcome. Okay. So, Weitz refers to the issues experienced as catastrophes. So, literally just almost like retelling the story. But that's my inference. That's my supporting detail. And then because there's not as much emotive language in the answer, I've just used or picked an aspect of what they've described and then sort of unpicked it. So the same way Stefanos looked at economic problems linking to hyperinflation, I've looked at civil war ties in with the threat from the left and the right, which is what we've covered, the Spartacist uprising and Cat Putsch. And political paralysis, you could argue, ties in with the difficulties of the constitution. Which again we've looked at. Now, neither civil war nor political paralysis tie in directly with hyperinflation, but you can see that sometimes with these sources, they will look to bring in different topics. So they're sort of testing you on your wide range of knowledge. So those answers were superb from a range of people there. Well done. Okay, now another 4-mark question. This one's slightly different though, obviously, because it's not written, it's pictorial. So we'd have to work out what can we infer from the source and what this therefore reveals about, again, similar question, the problems that the Weimar Republic faced. Now, I've said this before, but ultimately you don't need to use any own knowledge necessarily. In theory, anybody should be able to answer these questions without knowing anything about the topic. So what do we think here?
It's a great picture, isn't it? I mean,
it's wonderful.
Huge wad of cash being put into the fire.
That's it. So you'll see as well that the cash used as fuel, they might give you little captions here to try and help you and, prompt you. Because the 4-mark question is the first type of question that you'll face in an answer, in a paper rather. So it's almost like a warm-up. So what do we think? If we can see all that cash, like Duncan said, and some of that cash being used as fuel, what could we infer? Okay,
so the question, what's...
Oh, sorry, go on, Duncan. I keep talking you up.
I just said Aqua's asking, it's not quite clear to see what's happening in the picture if you're looking on a phone or whatever. So there's a woman's pushing large quantities of notes into a fire or a furnace or some in order to use, and there's a little caption that says cash used as fuel. So they're using the money to burn it to either heat a house or fuel something in some other way.
Great. So
we've got an answer from
I'll
Stephanos.
I keep cutting you up today, Duncan. I'm
It's
out of
okay.
practice. Apologies.
It's quite all right. No,
So-
I'm handing over to you.
So Stephanos has said money has become useless due to hyperinflation. Fantastic. That's definitely an inference. Now, which supporting detail would you then use to get that second mark? Likewise, Elizabeth inferred that the value of money has become useless and that the community saw this as worthless. Again, great inference, you get a mark. So then you'd want to think about which supporting detail. And I know that you would, you don't have to furiously type this out, but obviously refer directly to the image in order to do that. Okay, so picking out one inference is good.
I was just going to say, the tricky thing here is to come up with two, isn't it? Because it's just a very clear image of something happening. So I'm intrigued to see what the second one would be. I think some really good answers. But
Yeah, it is. I mean, this is one of the reasons that we chose this. It is particularly tricky because obviously the first inference is very clear, but it's how you would use the information to create a second. So, should we have a little look at the answers, please?
yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So, one of these, a few students commented, money was worthless during this time, and you can infer this because the money is more valuable as fuel for a fire than actual currency. Okay, which again, students in the chat, you'd already mentioned this, you would have got your marks. Okay, so I've also put here Germany was experiencing hyperinflation, or money was being printed on an enormous scale, okay, as an inference. And the detail that tells me this is simply because of the amount of banknotes in the picture. And the way they're being used demonstrates that there was an excessive printing of money. So it's simple as that. There's an excessive printing of money because that person has all that money around them. And that money in itself is worthless because it's more valuable as fuel. Okay, I like what Elizabeth said about the lack of normality attached to this action suggests that the money's worthless. That's great.
Yeah, very good. Really good stuff. Okay. So we've got one more activity before we finish off for today, and it's a key terms activity. What I've done with these key terms is swap the vowels around so they end up looking like nonsense words. But what you've got to try and do is work out what key term is hiding behind the nonsense word. Then most of them are terms that we've used or words that we've used in this session. And if you can tell us a little bit about it in the chat window as well, that'd be brilliant. So the first one, roha, roha. I tried to pronounce them for some reason. I always do this. What do we think? There's only one vowel there. Oh, Aqua's come straight in there with the raw. Yeah, absolutely. So the area that the French had occupied. Absolutely. Fantastic. Yeah, you are right, Aqua. It was raw. Pruntung. What could that be? What could it be? Well done, Elizabeth. Some people giving some extra information there. And yes, well done, Elizabeth. Printing it is. So they're printing large amounts of money. Aqua got that as well. Very good. Next one. Rapparatance. Sounds like a battle in the Boer War or something, but it's not. It's something else. What do we
That's
have?
quite tricky, that one.
Yeah. Rapparatance. Oh, Elizabeth straight in there as well. She's very good at this. Reparations. Well done. So yes, again, thinking about the causes, which someone was asking about earlier, the causes of the hyperinflation. One of the factors, as well as the occupation of the Ruhr, was the reparations that had to be paid after the First World War. Pusivi rezektunci, which is a type of pasta, I think. It's not a pasta dish; it's something else. So what could Pusivi Oh, Elizabeth saved me from trying to pronounce it again. Well done. It is passive resistance. Well done. That's really good. Okay. And then I don't know if I can even try to pronounce this one. I'll let you pronounce it in your heads. What could this one possibly be? been so good up to this point. Some suggestions here. What could it be? Oh, Elizabeth's come in again. A few others have come in. Brilliant. It is the Treaty of Versailles. Brilliant. Well done. Very good answer. And that's us finished from there. So, and just on the screen there, you can see there's a QR code if you want to come see some of our notes and materials to help with this and other topics, and also a range of resources there from Tutor to You. You can do so, and that's us done. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Wow, absolutely brilliant stuff. As always, gentlemen, thanks so much for that. I'm listening to that and obviously watching and trying to take part as much as I can. And I'm thinking, right at the moment, we're worried in the UK because inflation looks like it might hit 5%. And you know, it's almost unprecedented this century. I know we've got close to that before. And we really worried about it. And I remember in the 1980s, inflation was the big evil. And it never got anywhere near what it was like in the German Republic at that time. And so it contextualised how big a problem it really was, wasn't it? And how it added to all the other issues that were going on at that time. Listen, guys, that was absolutely brilliant. If I can just mention a few names: Elizabeth, Stephanos, Aqua, Zachariah. I think I might have pronounced that right. To name just a few. Forgive me if I've missed you out there in terms of some of your answers, but it was brilliant to see that. And gentlemen, I'm sure you'd agree, some really good answers as well from those guys.
Some excellent ones.
Wonderful.
Very good.
Really.
Always makes it useful when we get some proper feedback from students as we're doing this live. But just a reminder, of course, you can watch this thing all again. It's available almost as soon as I've finished and press the button. This video will be available, as will the PowerPoint presentation that we've been using. Thanks to Duncan, thanks to Rocky for tonight. Gentlemen, I think we're on again next week. Does that
We
sound
are,
correct?
and I think it's. I think we're on the Munich Putsch next. I think.
Putsch
I
next
think
week,
that's
okay.
right. So I think that was what we had on.
That's right.
I think that's what we had on the list. So
Things were tricky. Things were tricky in Germany in between the wars, weren't they? So yes,
certainly were.
we'll move on to the Munich Putsch next week. Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, and thanks again to everybody who took part tonight. And we'll see you very, very soon. Goodbye, everybody.
Cheers. Bye.
Take care.